remedial plan. Um, what we discussed as a group is that even though the court did have a ruling in favor for the plaintiffs, it's still not being implemented. And that's one thing that we discussed, like, who is seeing this out? So have those counties, those rural counties, have they received those extra fundings as it has been ruled that they were supposed to? Because it still found the finding that they have not, which we found.
So the answer, Ruby, is nobody is making them. Elections have consequences. I mean, if you watch those sessions, and by the way, I've been there in person and watched them, they just refuse to pay the money. So welcome, thank you, everybody. Was on a recruiting session from KPA tonight for the university. So a quick recap: the '97 decision is the plaintiffs lost. The state refused to change the funding formula to give poorer counties more than in state funds than the wealthy counties. They said there was no legal right to have the same amount at the end. So as you know, state was paying $8,000 per pupil, whether you were a rich county or a poor county. The rich counties, like the ones that I live in tonight, I'm in Mecklenburg, they added another 4,000. So Mecklenburg was at that time was spending 12,000 per pupil, and Hope was spending 8,000. And so what the lawsuit was to try to get the state to change the flat grant funding formula to a student-based funding formula where rich counties got more, poor counties got less. I mean, poor counties got more, rich counties got less. And when the rich counties added their 4,000, it'd be back to even. So if we did the numbers, instead of giving Mecklenburg County students 8,000, give them 6 and give Hope that extra 2. So in the end, they both end up at 10 rather than Hope being at 8 and Mecklenburg being at 12. But the state said, we're not doing that. We'll give you some extra money to help defray the cost of capital needs. Now, let's remember, this is how these poor counties got in this mess. Remember, I told you what happened in 1966? It was a watershed event. And it didn't look like much when I said in 1966, states got out of funding capital for school districts. You remember that's one of those significant events that happened in 66? Well, who has to pay for buildings now? Who has to let bonds and borrow the money and pay them back? Who has to pay the upkeep on buildings? Who has to pay the power bill, the electric bill, the water bill? That would be the local school district has to pay that from funds from the county commissioners who fund the school board's budget. Well, what the poor county said is we have to do capital now. We can't afford to put any money on the education side. We're having to put it on the building side. And so while the plaintiffs lost, Leandro won in '97, they said, we're going to start a state lottery and we're going to generate all this money to give you to help you with your capital needs. 5 years later, in 2002, at Leandro 2, they said, you aren't doing that. You owe all these people the money, Judge Manning said. And Judge Manning stayed with this case until he retired in 2016. And then Judge Lee said, you're not paying, you got to be paying more. And then in 17, Governor Cooper appointed West Ed, and they did a commission and said, you owe these people $5.6 billion. And then Judge Lee last year demanded that the General Assembly pay $2 billion at one time, and they said you need to retire. They got another guy in there now, but they just say 90-90 boo-boo. We ain't paying. We've got a super majority. Our party has a super majority. We got 70% of the votes. You can't make us do anything. And so the question comes, why didn't the Leandro plaintiffs appeal the original verdict in '97? Well, the reason they didn't is because the court ordered recompense, so they couldn't appeal. So what that meant was, even though they lost, they couldn't appeal because the court said, you're losing, but we're going to make them pay you some extra money anyway. We're not going to change the formula. They're going to give you extra money. And so that meant they could not appeal to the United States Supreme Court. 5 years later, we found out they ain't paying. The lottery didn't pan out. And it hadn't panned out since. And so Ruby's question is who makes these people pay? The voters. Vote them out. That's the only way you're going to make them pay. as you get a different group in there. Now, I'm not saying if the other side wasn't in charge, they wouldn't do the same thing. But what I'm telling you is when you have a supermajority in a state legislature, it's a battle between the legislative branch and the judicial. And the only way that you're going to make them pay what everybody agrees that they owe, $5.6 billion, is to vote enough people in that they don't have a supermajority and they can't just shake their, shake the finger in the face of the judiciary. That's where we are right now. But again, I even called Dr. Sane before this started. You got to remember the plaintiffs did not win the original case, but they couldn't appeal because they were given some monetary award, not a change in the funding system, which would have been a regular, ongoing, recurring money. We'll just give you some money from time to time, but that time to time never came because they weren't obligated by the court to change the funding so that it came every year. It was going to come in the form of capital from the lottery. The lottery is just a regressive tax on poor people. Schools get nothing, and even those opportunity scholarships, that money doesn't come to schools, and they're giving it to kids that really don't need it. They're giving it to kids to go to college, and I mean that's not the kids we're talking about can't graduate from high school. That's where we need the money for them. I'm not saying opportunity scholarships are bad, but when you got kids who can't get through school, you have to make priorities. But the group that's in power right now is making sure they shovel all the money they can to the people that vote for them. Too many poor people vote for Republicans. That's kind of the way the world works. So this is a case in micro politics as well, or macro politics. This is a national case. Daniel Simmons, who's in last night class, grew up and went to school in Ohio, and this was one of the cases they used when he was in school there. Leandro is the national funding case. Now, here's the rest of the story, and I'll let you all get back to work. Here's the bad news, folks. 8 years ago, 33 states did some, and the District of Columbia did some form of student-based budgeting, which meant they gave more to the poor places and less to the wealthier places. 8 years ago, 33. Remember those numbers. As of today, it's down to 25. We're not going the right direction here. Now, you could draw a map, and you know how that goes. As states become red, as they move from purple to red or blue to purple, they go back to the flat grant. That's exactly what happens. That political party does not believe in school-based budgeting. So eight states that previously did it have now abandoned it and gone back to flat grant. We're going the wrong way. But elections have consequences. You get the schools you deserve that you vote for. That's grown people talk here. And so we're trying to move more money out of the lottery into vouchers and opportunity scholarships, and away from schools and public education, because that's the party that's in charge. And they're not paying that 5.6 million, by the way. You're not ever going to get that out of them. That's not going to happen. They're last off. Well, they started out offering a billion, then they offered 700 million, and now their last offer is 385 million. But it doesn't matter. If you took it, they're still not going to pay it. They're just not going to pay it. They're offered 385 million on a $5.6 billion bill. About 8% is what they're offering, but they'll never pay that. You can't make me. Where we are. That's a great question, though, Ruby. All right, move on. I'll hush for a minute.
No, we thank you, because as we were meeting and kind of discussing everything, we just had some of those questions and just trying to look and figure out, especially when you see the most recent ruling being so recent, just November, and still nothing changed, So thank you for answering those questions for us.
All right. When you look at analysis of, we're looking at the analysis of the superintendent versus with the ethical paradigms,
Mm-hmm.
and when we looked at justice, um, in aiming to balance resources amongst the schools, even though he was trying to do that, the superintendent's plan to move money is just against the law.
Yeah.
You can't move money from one school to another. It's just against the law to do that. Then when you thinking about the paradigm of care, we saw it. I mean, from the plan, from the case study, it looked as there was a connection with parents in the community. Even though the superintendent wanted to allocate SBB funds to support at-risk students, again, still not right because he's moving money from other schools.
And you better believe them other schools are not going to be happy.
Right. Looking at critique, again, reallocating the funds is not the responsibility of the superintendent. You can't move federal or state money. And just also keep it in mind, even with some of the grants and things that you have, or your local funds that has to go through the commissioner, and grants come with a lot of strings attached as well. We were kind of talking about our school a couple years ago. We received a grant from the Dale Earnhardt Foundation. It was like $135,000. And with that, it still was a whole lot of red tape to the point where a lot of that money is still sitting in the account.
Yeah.
So,
And by the way, Yolanda did a really good job this week on her answer to cyberbullying DB4. She's kind of the star of the week on that one. So while she's on the screen, I've got my notes written down. But part of the problem too with that grants that Yolanda just talked about is poorer districts can't get them, and if they do, they can't spend them because of the in kind. You know what in kind means when you get a grant? Say you get a grant for $100,000. The general expectation is that you will provide in kind goods or services or money to match that. That's why they call them matching grants. That's what that matching is. It's an in kind is what it's called. INKIND, in kind. So if you're a poor district and you got a $1 million grant, but you had to provide $1 million, could you spend it? No, that's part of the red tape that Yolanda's talking about. Is there's a lot of red tape. If you want, a lot of times the in kind, they'll say, well, we won't make you actually write a check for $1 million, but you got to sign personnel. Poor districts right now can't get enough teachers. How are they going to pull teachers off of what they need them in core classes to put them on grant work? Oh, and so our goods or services. So that's the fallacy of grants for poor people and poor districts. Is you get the dignitaries with their black suit and red tie on, having their picture on the front page of the local paper, but on the back side of that, the money never comes because you don't have the in kind to match what they're giving you, and it costs. Or you've got to defray the what we call the it's between 7 and 15% that it costs you to disperse the funds in your back office, and you've got to cover that as well. So just like Gardner Webb, you notice it's kind of an odd number when you pay your technology fee. What is it? Your portfolio fee every semester of $100. Well, we're paying that $100 out to your state grader to do that. Here's the thing, though. That $7 is what Gardner Webb is charging to process the check and pay them. Gardner Webb, so they're passing that on to you. So if you had a grant and you employed people and they were putting on programs or teaching or whatever, somebody has to do the paperwork on them. And that's usually 7% is cheap. It's usually 12 to 15%. What we call back office paperwork, the payroll staff, all that kind of stuff. That's another barrier for poor counties. They can't afford to pay the back office the 15% to have all that work done. So grants. See, what the Leandro case was, we don't want to have to get into grants. We don't want to have to hope we get money every now and then. We don't want to have to deal with the political fallout of taking money like this superintendent was going to do from one school and give it to another. We want it to come that way from the state. That way, if we're poor, we just get the money. We don't have to have money to get more money. We just want you to change the formula where you give us more and them less. And we don't have to fight the local politics of that, of the infighting between schools or between county commissioners who actually fund the school budget. You know that school board members are unempowered. They do not levy taxes. The school board has to go hat in hand with their budget to the county commissioners to get it funded. And remember, those county commissioner races are one partisan and two district wide now. And so a county commissioner is not going to like it if the budget is that his schools in his district get less than somebody else. He knows he'll lose next time at election time. You take all that local politics out and this issue of grants if you just simply change the funding formula from the state. That's what Leandro wanted. Change the formula. We're not asking for more money altogether. What we're saying is these people don't need as much as these people. They're willing, or they have the ability to add more through their local budget. We're asking you to make it equitable, not even. We're asking you to make it equitable so in the end it ends up even. And the state said, no, we'll give you money. But everybody knew back then. Full disclosure, I was on the losing side. I was on the Leandro legal team. Let me make sure that you understand that. I'm not 30. How many years is that? Not since 1997, 26. We started in 1994, 26 years later. I'm still not mad, am I? After 20, I'm still as mad as I was the day after, and it's 26 years later because we knew they would never pay a penny. We knew we'd never see a dime of it. Didn't matter what they said. No, we're not changing the formula, but we're going to give you grants or pork barrel. We're going to give you some money. It won't be a regular thing. We'll just give it to you as you need it. We knew that they'd never get a nickel, and schools have never gotten a nickel from Leandro, not one, zero. And again, the last count is that they're 5.6 billion behind in what they owe. But it's just like monopoly money. If you're never going to pay it, what does it matter how much you owe? And they're never going to pay it. Not in my lifetime. Never going to pay it. So grants are not the boon, the favor, the prize that we think they are. They rarely come to fruition because poor people just can't match what has to be matched in order to unlock the monies. That's always the problem.
I agree. Thank you for that. The last one is professional. The superintendent wanted the principals to communicate the information to the parents, and he wasn't fully transparent. So that was just a lot of responsibility to put onto the principals, knowing that parents in the community were going to have tons of questions. So not really professional.
So in conclusion, superintendent's student-based budget plan was not appropriate.
Right.
Basically, you have to think about it. You cannot move federal funds. That's the number one rule. You know that from the get. And then they only met with 4 principals who received funding. States are responsible for funding equal basic education. And according to Schilling and Tommel, our readings for this week, site-based budgeting, SBB, gives authority to principals to allocate funds among various line items in a budget. The SBB must involve all stakeholders in the process of effectiveness. And also, according to roles of a principal, 115C288, powers and duties of a principal H, principals must make budgets available to parents, students, and other stakeholders. So in conclusion, don't move the money. Thank you all tonight for listening to us. And again, I apologize. I was stuck in the storm for lateness, but thank you all. I think it was quite enlightening. And thank you, Dr. Lamb and Dr. Saint,
Thank you.
Enlightening us as well.
All right. So if you will, Dr. Saint, I'm going to put him back in charge, but I'm looking for my list right here. I want to share some numbers with you. I have a question, by the way. You probably already covered this, but I want to make sure. How did the superintendent fund the pilot the year before? In the little pilot that he ran, how did he fund that? Discretionary money, The superintendents have a little discretionary money, the general fund. That's how the superintendent in Chapel Hill Carrboro got fired. She took her discretionary money, which in that district they allowed her to spend up to $90,000 one time, and she entered into a contract with a consulting firm to put extra teachers on the poor side of town in Carrboro. And of course, the Chapel Hill side went crazy, and she ended up, they fired the finance officer and let her resign, but they forced her out. But again, superintendents do have some discretionary money, and it varies from district to district that they can spend on things like this, but it can't be ongoing, because if it did, it would be moving money. But again, I did some math last night right quick, and let me share this with you. So the first 11 years that I was a principal was before the Leandro ruling. The last 3 and the 12 that I was in the central office, so 15 was after Leandro. And so here's what that's important. After Leandro, you can't mix money anymore. There was a time, the 11 years that I was principal before Leandro, you could mix money. You could take Title I money, federal, you could put it with state money and some local money. That's how I put the first computer lab in Burke County, period. In Burke County schools, the first computer lab, I put it in. And I used, but you could go across budget codes and do things like that. After the Leandro ruling, you got to understand, after Leandro, you can't move money, you can't combine monies. It really seriously limited what you could do. I mean, that wasn't by accident, folks. And so if you've got money in this pot, and this pot, you can't put it all together. You can't cross budget lines anymore. Just like the last group said, you can't move money. You can't. Federal money follows kids, state money follows kids, local money, because the county commissioners improved it, it follows kids. You cannot take and cross budget lines anymore. That was quite, I was quite the wheeler dealer back in my young days, putting all this stuff together. You don't wheel and deal anymore. Whatever it comes for is what you have to spend it on. If you have some left, you can't put it with other. It's not a deal anymore. Dr. Stain, I'm going to turn it back to you, since you're doing a great job. I appreciate it. From your experience as a principal, I suspect you didn't have too many years before Leandro, because you're kind of a normal aged fellow, you're not a fossil like me. So that wasn't really ever a thing for you, I suspect.
No, money wasn't ever a thing. It was pretty much, here's your money, here's how you spend it. Don't do anything you shouldn't do with it.
Yeah.
So I think I consider myself a little bit fortunate with that. We've talked about that a little bit today, and I got to shout out Group 2. They even tied in the Chapel Hill Carrboro incident with this case study, which is great.
Yeah.
And I got to say, they were channeling some Dr. Lamb. The first 2 groups and the third were great.
Great.
Good conversations.
That's the last group. That just marvelous. I mean, y'all are clicking on all cylinders now. Now you're understanding in case studies, you got to consider everything. You got to do your research. You got to dig. You got to find. You got to start, and you got to kind of put it all together. But yeah, the Chapel Hill Carrboro, absolutely. You tie that in, you begin to understand that you can go too far. Even if you have discretionary money, you can go too far. If you violate the principle of Leandro, which is you cannot give more to some than others, that only the state could do that, and they're not going to. And not only are they not going to, as you saw in the Duke Law Review, is they held that you can't do it either. You cannot move money like that. And so that's what she attempted to do. And thought and if you knew Leandro, you knew that, but probably she didn't. I know her. She's not old enough. She didn't ever administer before Leandro, and it's not been a thing since 1997. There's not been any of that stuff. It's not like she learned it, back in the old days like I did, the 11 years that I was principal before Leandro. And then, for me, it was a change, and it was hard not to say, Raymond, what do we got? Or, my Todd or Debbie, what do we got on my finance people? What do we got? It was hard for me to say, well, how much was this? Can we put it? After 97, when I was a high school principal, when I had Debbie or Sonia, no, they'd tell me, we can't do that anymore. They'd remind me, and I was like, dang, I used to do that all the time, but couldn't do it anymore. And so the superintendent in Chapel Hill Carborough should have known better. But again, it gets to, this is a case where this superintendent's just like her. This is a case of misfeasance. He did the wrong thing. He didn't mean to, but he did the wrong thing. The case last time was a case of malfeasance. She maliciously did this, knew it was wrong, and did it anyway. We're going to have one case of nonfeasance at the end where the principal had a duty to act and didn't. And then we're going to have one, the next case we come to is all three. But we try to make sure that the overarching is you understand that the superintendent here is not a bad person, but did a bad thing. You know, sometimes good people do bad or illegal things. And you can't let, somebody said last night, you can't, you know, what was it? The analogy that they use, you got to follow the law and not your heart. It's pretty simple here. And boy, I tell you what, remembering, you know, stuff like this is easy to prove, folks. Money leaves a trail. This is not, this is easy to prove. That's why they tell you moving money or spending it inappropriately is the quickest way to get fired, because it's dead bang. It's not a gray area. You got to uphold the law, and if you don't, I mean, it's easy to track the money. So got to remember that. All right, Dr. Singh, back to you. You're in charge tonight. I'm gonna sit back and listen.
No mercy. I don't know if they're in good hands. But I think that leaves us with the final group, group 3, right?
Excellent.
It does. Let me share my screen. All right, so my group is, of course, myself, Ms. Thornton, Ms. Miller, and Ms. Davis. And we're just going to go ahead and get started.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Landrieu case. Of course, we've been speaking about the same case on the last 3, but again, this case consists of 5 school districts in the low wealth counties in North Carolina. They filed a lawsuit stating that they did not have enough money to provide an equal education for their children despite paying more in taxes. The Supreme Court ruled that North Carolina has a constitutional obligation to provide a sound basic education and not equal funding. So they have to make sure that they have competent, well-trained teachers and principals, and that they have access to sufficient resources, and that's all. The court ruled that schools do not have to provide that equal funding. However, a sound-based education consists of sufficient reading, writing, and English speaking skills, sufficient knowledge of geography, history, economics, knowledge of math, science, history, and all those things just to be able to function in society. And they also need to be prepared either to enter the workforce or to enter college. And to them, that is a sound basic education. Now, on our screen, you will see the image, and we saw it earlier, of course, but it's equality and equity. And when we looked at this kind of match up with the case and with the superintendent, because the superintendent, we believe that he was thinking equity versus the board or the state of North Carolina just thinking equality. If you look at the first image, it assumes that everyone will benefit from the same support and they're being treated equally. And as we can see, even with them both be having just that one box, it's still not really equal. And that's what the SBB is. Every student gets the same thing, no matter what. That's that SBB. And then we look at the equity part of it. That's the second image. And as you can see, individuals were given different support to make it possible for them to actually have equal access. So in that case, it was the ramp, it was 2 for the girl. And then of course, the man could already see. So they have equal access. So we think the superintendent was trying to function under equity. He was just doing it the wrong way. versus the equality that the North Carolina Constitution and the state of North Carolina Supreme Court was ruling as far as that sound basic education.
So on the role of the principal, I found it in the document to make available school budgets and school improvement plans. The principal shall maintain a copy of the school's current budget and school improvement plan, including any amendment to the plan, and shall allow parents of children in the school and other interested persons to review and obtain such documents. And so just to sum that up, that any stakeholder has the right to know how the money is being allocated at the school, and then also being notified of any said changes to those documents. The principal should be able to make account for those transactions and make sure that they match the federal and state regulations and guidelines, or he or she definitely opens themselves up for legal actions and ramifications.
Excellent.
So is the plan appropriate? So in favor of the plan being appropriate, the schools were able to focus on their specific needs and wants. Teachers will be able to have input in how the monies were allocated. Secondly, schools need to have different bases of schools' needs are different based on population. So the monies were weighted. The increase of equity among the students and the stakeholders must play a role in implementing the budget if we were in favor of this.
And I had the one that goes against. One concern that I was looking at is, the principal may not have any background knowledge on how to control a type of budget that is this large. So do we want to put this amount of money in front of a principal and let him or she decide, what happens with that money? How are they going to base their decisions creating the budget? What if there's a conflict in the staff that one group is getting more than the other?
What do you mean if? The appropriate term there is when.
When, yeah.
There's conflict among the staff.
So it's going to be really hard to show equity in that aspect. How is the principal going to demonstrate that they were actually appropriately, allocated amongst the staff and the needs of the school? And how are they going to monitor these using all of these funds differently? And who is going to be responsible for monitoring those funds? So that's a large part being against that plan, because I can't even imagine presenting to a staff, we have X amount of money, here it all is, and I'm going to give X amount of dollars to drama, but man, not you this year. Better luck next year. So those are my points for being against this.
And there's many of these points that you've got there. Thank you, Melissa, for this. Are the problem with grants as well. Who's going to monitor it? Who's responsible for monitoring the funds? You have to put in an oversight. You have to pay for that. That's part of that back office. Many grants require that you do some sort of data collection and evaluation, and you have to have a person that does that. You have to pay that. You have to pay them. That can't come from your grant. So many of these things that you see on the screen is the problem when you get grants. It's the same. It's the same thing. So this is a good slide here.
All right. And that's it for our group.
Excellent.
That's such a good point, Dr. Lamb. One thing about my school budget in the schools that I was in, every time I left a school, I left a ton of money in our budget from grants, because it's just, sometimes it's not even worth the amount of money that you get. And I know someone else on the call said that they had the Dale Earnhardt grant, and they actually that money's still sitting there. And it's such a shame, but it comes to a point when you get, especially the smaller grants, when you get a $2,000-$3,000 grant, you have to sit down and evaluate, is all the time and energy that you have to put into proving that you're using the grant the way it was intended worth all the resources that you allocate to find, to prove it. So grants were, um, that they were a headache. No, the big ones were not. I'm not going to complain about the big ones. If there was enough money there to do some good, then yes. But the
Well,
small
that's what I was going to say is the only one that I ever got that I felt was worth it. I got actually $186,000 to do professional development. That's the only one that I ever got because the district took. Now, this was again, I'm old. This is a thing of the past. It does not happen now. But used to back in the 1990s, you can stop your share now. Back in the 1990s, when you got your state money every year, the state of North Carolina had a professional development budget that went out, and it was allotted straight directly to schools on the number of faculty members that you had. It was about don't hold me to this. It was about 12% of their salaries, their state salaries, about 12%. That was divided up, which was a pretty good amount of money. And so Charlotte Mecklenburg let me use the state appropriation for professional development to pay the in-kind part of this $186,000 federal grant so that I actually got to spend the $186,000. That's the only time that I ever had a grant that was worth it. And it just so happened that the two dovetailed in, that the state professional development money paid the in-kind part so that I could use the federal. Those days are over after Leandro now. Remember, you can't do that anymore. That's why I said I got out of the grant building business after Leandro. I can tell you right now, I got out of it. It just wasn't worth it. I couldn't raise enough money to spend it. I couldn't come up with enough money across budget lines like that to spend it anymore. And like Dr. Sane said, the small ones, God, you're working for a penny an hour on them. The $3,000 grant, you got to spend X number, hundreds of hours of personnel time to do that. No, teachers hate that. We did all that work and we got how much? Got $6. You have to make sure that you don't. Grants are really bad to overburden your staff with extra work, by the way. And so when the in kind is either you assigned all these extra duties and responsibilities to your staff who hate you for it, or you have to hire somebody. That's what I'm talking about, the in kind. It didn't always have to be money. Sometimes it's personnel. That's why when we have you, every time that you do an action plan, marketing plan, professional, we always have you identify not only how much money is it going to cost you, but sometimes how much personnel is it going to take. That's the bigger issue. If you're poor, you don't have money to put in kind, and you have to put all that extra work on your faculty. They do not like you when you do that, by the way. Especially if their particular group is not getting the benefits of that grant. Oh my, you don't want to fight that fight. You'd rather fight a saw than do that. I can tell you right now. So the grant business is a tough business. You can't cross budget codes anymore to really make grants worthwhile. You can't cross budget codes anymore to get things for kids. It's made it really, really hard in the modern era. But now the other hand, the rules are real clear. There's no gray anymore. If you got it, you can spend it. If you don't, you don't. And it's pretty much determined what you can spend it for. So, this is a superintendent case, but the metaphor here is that the superintendent can't do it. You can't do it as a principal. That's why I use this one and don't change it to something different. Is that even the superintendent can't spend money any way they want to. The rules are very tight on the money. So our first case study was about grading, and this one is about money. Then we're going to have one on protected class of students in 2 weeks, and then our last one will be on exceptional children. Those are the big rocks, folks. And one story before we leave tonight. And again, what a wonderful job. I inherited a junior high school where the previous principal, for some reason, unknown reason, decided that they were going to go to a 9-period day. I can't make this up. I'm not smart. And all classes, 7th, 8th, and 9th. What's the problem when you get to the 9th grade is the classes were 42 minutes each. If you do the math, they came up 40 hours short on enough hours to grant a Carnegie unit for graduation. How many times did we see that this past graduation season because of COVID? All these kids, they let some of them walk, some of them didn't. All these kids who were short hours to graduate. That's another one of those things that's easy to prove. And again, you're responsible for grading, you're responsible for budget. Those are the two easiest things to prove. If you sat down and say how many is 42 hours, 42 minutes times 180 days, that does not equal 1,180 hours it takes to get a Carnegie unit. It comes up about 40 hours short. So we had to put those students in summer school for 2 weeks for 4 hours a day at the end of that year before they could go on to the high school. That was bad enough, but think about graduation. So again, you've got to take your duties and responsibilities seriously in terms of grading and making sure that you're meeting all the requirements on grading, which was our first case study, and now on money, our second one. Then we'll talk about your duties and responsibilities and requirements on protected individuals. That's all of your that's it's going to be LGBTQ, but it could be any protected class of students in your building. And the last one is again, Dr. Sane being the expert, is intervention and EC will kill you if you can't keep up with it. It will end you. You will lose your house. And so it's the big rocks here, folks. These are the 4 big rocks that we have this semester in our case studies. They're the 4 areas most likely to cause you the most injury as a school administrator, and that's why we do. So again, I appreciate your time so much and how hard you worked. I will, Dr. Sane, if you will process the video and either upload it or send it to me, and we'll get it to YouTube so that we can see these. But I really enjoyed your presentations tonight. We'll have class next week, and then let me look at my calendar. So next week would be the 28th. The following week is we're off because of the 4th of July holiday, and then when we come back, we'll do a case study. We'll have one more class and then our final case study. So that's our of those. Uploading your artifacts. Make sure now when you're uploading your artifacts in your competency folio, make sure that you read the directions for each of those. So let me share my screen right quick. I bet I don't have that loaded anymore because I was on another Zoom and moved this out of the way. So let me go back there. Yeah, I jumped out of that. So when you go in, remember you don't go into your DRF portfolio. Let me move this to the side. So when you sign into TaskStream, and I'm going to go in as an author, go into your folios and web pages. Don't go into your DRF. All right, let me see. Here's one right here. Here's a mark. So when you go in, when you click on communication, it says one from the app cell, one from the SOP, one open-ended. If you want to do one, do the open-ended one. Change management. Again, you would do an open-ended if you want to do one there. Creative thinking, customer service. See here, you can put one, you can put 2 in this one if you want to, one from the OMA, one from the SCIP. It's not important that you do all 1 and all 21, but try to get 21 in there this semester. So here's you can do 2 there, and of course you can always do an open-ended. Delegation that's 3. National intelligence. 4, 5, 6. There's the OMA is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So 13, if you look over here at your competencies in your competency folio, what was that? 13 times they asked for one from either the OMA or the skip. And then the others you can choose to put an open-ended in. So that's the way that you do that. And please remember, use the buttons up here. If it's a PDF, a picture, or a screenshot, make sure, PDF is text and image. If you got a video, a link, make sure you do that. If you got a PowerPoint that you want to show us, make sure you do that. And if you've got a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet, use attachment. Kathleen, you have a question?
Yeah, when I was looking through them, I kind of made myself like a chart to get
Yeah.
organized. There's four of the evidences that are required, either the CAP, this or the SIAP. We already used our open-ended ones from last semester because the APSL and the APTEL weren't there. So we can't possibly get any for those for this semester, correct?
Well, you can.
We're not doing the CAP and the SIAP, are we?
But I mean, that's what I'm talking about. You don't have to make sure you hit each one of these every semester. You just have to make sure you try to get 21 in there in some variety.
21 in general.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Yeah. So yeah, you can put 21 in this semester, but you're exactly right. There won't be a place for you to put one under every one of these. That is correct. I just highlighted where, there's places for 13 from the OMA and the skip, and then, then you can kind of choose where you do some open-ended ones. But try to, another 7 or 8 for open-ended. Try to get 20. Don't come up in the fall and only have like one for all of them. Then you got to put 2 in for the fall. Kind of, there's no requirement. I'm not going to grade these or whatever. But what I don't like is for you to come up to your last semester and you're trying to get done, and all of a sudden we look at your competency folio and I need to see 63 artifacts and you've got 3. And then you're kind of figuring out what I do with my stuff. I don't remember where I put that. I lost that. I knew I saved that. Is that on my camera? Of course, now y'all are a lot younger than me, but now one thing, even though I'm old, I can still remember stuff and find stuff. But even I would not. I don't dare the devil here. I don't want to have to rely on my memory to remember where I put stuff. And so it's just the best practice is each semester, to try to get 21 in there so that you don't leave yourself a bunch at the end. But Kathleen's exactly right. That doesn't mean that you're going to put 21 in all the 21. You're going to put 2 in some, like some said OMA and skip, and then some didn't have either. But you could if you don't have but 1 in there, I'd drop an open-ended in it.
They made it seem like it was a lot more regimented last semester. Like they told me not to submit extra ones that I could have.
Well,
because
what
we
they
had
were
to have
worried about was you're going to put stuff in that would kind of embarrass you later on. Remember, this is not really so much for us as it's for you and prospective employers. We tend to find that in the first semester they put stuff in that's kind of not really good. But now you kind of know what the deal is. I'd love to see a dozen. It's okay, but we kind of limit you in your first semester. Is don't kind of like a kid, you kind of have to keep the training wheels on for a little while and be sure that you got it, because I've seen some pretty embarrassing stuff in these things, and we've had to go in and kind of edit them out. And also, and you don't really learn until after school law. You shouldn't have pictures of kids in there, by the way. You know the law on that, on FERPA. You can't have, and see, that's what I'm talking about. I've gone through and I've seen inappropriate pictures from like events where they didn't have enough clothing on, and they were like me. There should have been a weight limit on their clothes. We've had to edit some of that stuff out. We've had to take kids out. We've had stuff that was not complimentary at all, and that's why we tell them, first semester, more is not better until they kind of figure it out, until they've been through school law and realize that there's rules on stuff that you can put in things like this and then publish it, because you're going to be able to send a link out to prospective employers. This will be in social media. This will become social media. So you got to remember the rules. But yeah, it's tight the first semester. But now, once y'all have learned, it's Katie bar the door. Make them as great as you want to make them. Have good stuff in them. I mean, make it something that you would be proud to show a prospective employer that here's the work that I can do. This is the things that I have done. We don't want one that when you send it to them, they say, "Good Lord, you see some of the pictures now? We're never hiring that person." This is a really good benefit for our folks that nobody else does. They simply have you write your stuff and keep your logs, but we've added this because we're the only Cape school in North Carolina that went through it. Cape says that just keeping a log is not proof that you're competent in your internship. They wanted to see artifacts. They wanted to see things. And so I designed this system, and I could have put it in the regular DRF, but then you wouldn't be able to share it. This way you can publish and share it as a video link, and people can go in and see all your stuff. It's wonderful. Employers love it that they can see a portfolio of your work. So we want you to be proud of it. We want it to be legal, ethical, and we want you to be proud of it, that it will help you get a job, not lose the one you got. So that's a great question, Kathleen. But I'd like to see a lot of good stuff. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I don't know if you already addressed this, but who do we request comments from when we finally request from you? Do we wait until all 21 are in there, like at the end of the semester, or?
No, you can, but don't, if you're going to put 5 in, don't do them one at a time. Put all 5 in and then hit comments so I only get one email. So if you know you got 5 you're going to put in today, put them all in and it'll let you request comments on those 5, and I get one email rather than 5. But no, if you want to put 5 in, let me look at them. That'd be great. Remember, I read everything y'all turn in. I grade all the work. I look at all your competency folios. I'm full time. I don't have anything else to do because I'm old, and so I love reading all your stuff and seeing all the things that you do. And I would prefer Dr. Sane spend his time coming up with great lessons for you and activities rather than him having to be bored and be bothered with that. That's what I do all the time. His expertise, I want him to share that with you, not just grade your work. Look at it. So send them to me. I love to look at them. I love to see what you're doing, what's going on. It keeps me kind of connected to schools by seeing that stuff. And Dr. Sane adds so much value from his expertise doing the lessons that he does, rather than, I don't want folks coaching with me just grading work. I want them spending time with you and sharing their expertise with you. That's the value of having, these resident experts that come along in our classes with us. Just like last semester, y'all had, 2 sitting principals who were fabulous. You can't even, you can't beat that. I mean, it's been a day since I was a principal. It's been 23 years since I was a principal. 23 years. Some of you are not much older than that. And then I spent if I read my list here, I spent the next 12 in the central office after that. And so I learned a little something in central office, on maybe not too much, but it's been a day. It's been a day. And I've been at Gardner Webb for 12 years. And so it's been a day. Not saying that he's in schools all the time. That's the difference. He can speak to, I'm a has-been. He's a right now. There's limited value in that. Your time, everybody's time passes. And I get that. It's hard pill to swallow sometimes, but you need people who are relevant, who are new, who are doing it right now. You need them working with you every semester, because you're not going to go to the world when I was a principal. Again, I hadn't been principal, and even in this millennium, you need to be trained and worked with by people who know what the daily grind is today, not what it was used to be. So I'll do all the paperwork kind of stuff and the back office stuff in order to have Dr. Sane share his expertise with us every week. That's the plan. I'll be glad to look at your stuff. Happy to. Is that it? It's 8 o'clock. We got out in 2 hours. Again, next week we'll try to keep it at a little extra, because we're going the full 2 hours. We went a little over last time. Probably would if I'd been with you all the time tonight. But again, it's summer school. We have to go a little extra because we're only meeting 10 times rather than normal 16. So, but again, your work is great. I read it. Again, if y'all can see discussion board. Yolanda did a good post on cyberbullying, well documented. If you want to see hers, it's to the point. It's really good. I saw some other good stuff all week, Kathleen. We had some really good reflections from our case study. I really like those. Those all went out really well. Ruby had a good one. I like some of her things. Zach did a good job on a couple of his posts this week. Connie again, always, but Melissa, Kathleen, your stuff catches my eye every week. I enjoy reading it. It's good. And the case study tonight was really, really good. In terms of digging into it, I could see that from the two that I saw, that y'all beginning to understand that the law is a little bit deeper than just, I think it ought to be this way, or I think it ought to be that way. You have to follow the law. If you do, you'll be okay. Dr. Singh, thank you again tonight. Again, I had a university commitment tonight. We were recruiting with our collaborative partner, the K-12 Teaching Alliance tonight. So I had a role in that, and I had to be there. Again, I don't normally miss, but I was with that group tonight for a while, and I appreciate Dr. Singh filling in. I know he did better than me. So Dr. Singh, you close us out tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I gave them a mouthful earlier, Dr. Lamb, but yeah, just you all hit the nail on the point. Money is tricky. Money is going to give you a lot of headaches. So just make sure that you do what you're supposed to with your money, and when you don't know what to do with your money, ask questions. Ask questions to the finance department, and you will live a long and healthy career and keep your houses in public education. Y'all have a great evening.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.